Guys, his father died when he was 16, his mother in his 20s. He lost everything he owned before he was 30 years old. Then Sam Berman built a company on the back of a napkin sketch, a company that now ships for Google and the largest tech, defense, and aerospace companies in the world. Here's the best part, though. He wrote a book about the psychology that it took to get there. This is my conversation with Sam Berman on his book. Welcome to The Price of Success. Mr. Sam Berman, my man, you wrote this book called The Militant Mind, The Psychology of Building What Doesn't Exist. Dude, this book has been phenomenal. And so, Sam, here's where I'd love to start this podcast today. In your book, I underline this. It says entrepreneurship isn't about starting a company. It's about becoming someone capable of carrying one. My man, how do you know that's true?
Because I've lived it. And I think, Chris, first of all, thanks. I think it's important to understand the distinction of what I mean by that in terms of when I talk about the subtitle of building what doesn't exist. There's different kinds of entrepreneurs, and the entrepreneurs that build something that they pull out of their head, like I did, a napkin sketch, something that does not exist in the world. That's a different kind of person. I'm not, my famous thing is that we're not running a donut shop here. We're not opening a franchise. And I take nothing away from people who do that. But when you take something out of your heart and out of your head, you have to be a different kind of person. You have to be someone who understands that real entrepreneurship. I mean, the people who envision something like that, they have to be arrogant enough to believe they can do it, and then humble enough to actually do it. And what I mean is that you have to have a really unreasonable belief in yourself, but you have to evolve in the process because it's a reflection of who you are over time. I've noticed with LARC, for example, we only grow as I grow. We only grow as I overcome issues in my life. There's something very cathartic about starting businesses at this level where you have to almost overcome your past. And why I say that is because most real entrepreneurs, people who are grinders, people who really go after it, they are escaping something that hurt them. Something broke them in the past. And so it's cathartic in the sense that these are almost healing to you. And if you're not willing to face your darkness, your past, whatever happened to you, whatever broke you, then you're not going to reflect that in what you're building, not just in your company, but in your life, your family, your health, your happiness. So a business is just another part of that foundation. And so that's what I mean. You have to evolve into the person you are meant to be. Me being a person with very deep faith, I believe that these are almost tests to us. They are the gauntlet that we have to run to become the people God meant us to be. And again, business is a part of it. But what we do at LARC is so ground up and attacking these massive institutions that have existed for thousands of years. You better be a person of incredible strength. You better be a person who's willing to fight through and have an insane level of endurance, and a psychological strength. And you better be willing, when those demons, that darkness are chasing you, you better be willing to turn around and face it, or you're going to go nowhere. And that's not just business. It's a life thing. So that's what I really meant by that. And that's what Militant Mind is about, right? You have to have that militant mindset where no matter what, I'm going to win. No matter what, I'm going to face the giants and beat them. So that's what that's really about.
Yeah. You mentioned belief, and as I started to go through your book, you mentioned briefly, but it caught my attention. You said you weren't the kid who was starting businesses at a young age, like many entrepreneurs say they had that, whether they were baking cookies or doing some odds and end job selling papers or something.
Yeah.
So that wasn't part of your past, yet you just told me that it takes incredible belief. So take me back to Sam before the success, and where did that belief originate from?
Well, I've always been someone who's had a fairly deep faith in things. I look around at the world and I think this didn't create itself, right? So there's a great deal of belief in something greater than myself. So I've always had that. I'm also a third born boy, so I'm a grinder by definition.
Okay.
I always like to tell people, my older brothers used to beat the tar out of me, but I'm the guy you could, stick a railroad spike through my leg and I'll bite you in the neck, right? I mean, that's just what younger boys are like. So I had that sort of birth order thing for myself. So I've always been kind of a scrappy fighter of a guy. But I wasn't that guy who was saying, I'm going to start a lemonade stand. I'm going to do, but I have always been someone who wants to create. I think the greatest gift that we're given is to be creators. And I love to build. I love to pull things out of my mind to the point where it almost becomes like oxygen to me, where I have to say, I need to see that thing in the real world. Just before this call, I was sitting down with my son, who's an engineering student, and he's designing something for us. And we just spent 2 hours just grinding into it. And that you can't get in a better situation than that for me, like just grinding out an idea and solving problems. And so I think that, again, I distinguish there's entrepreneurship and then there's this sort of different level of entrepreneurship. And I am that different level just because I'm type A, I'm scrappy. I am a person of faith. You can knock me down 100 times, I'll get up 101 times and just keep coming at you. And so I think that it really is more of an attitude and a sort of character position. I don't think entrepreneurs are technically, when you look at the ones who have really done something, the Steve Jobs of the world. So if you go back in their story, something broke them, there's some anger, some fire, some darkness in them that they learned to channel, or they're just angry enough at the world where they say, I'm going to prove you all wrong. Right. And so I was that kid who was a bit of an outcast. Not a bit. Actually, I was a lot of an outcast. I never really fit in. Okay. I'm a kid from the South who grew up in actually Los Angeles. I'm from Georgia. So, I was this sort of chubby, curly headed kid when I had hair, deep Southern accent. So it wasn't the coolest kid, cruising through Los Angeles. So I never really fit in. So I will, it's the outcast kids like that, the ones who I was never a good student. I couldn't stand school. I couldn't stand everyone else's rules. That's what makes an entrepreneur. It's the ones who look at the system and say, I'm not playing in your sandbox anymore. I'm going to do it differently. And it's a hard life. I'll tell you, it's a hard life to be that guy because the teachers beat you up. I mean, I tell a story in the book about my third or fourth grade teacher. I don't remember who it was now, but she wanted to hold me back, said I was remedial. And my mom, who was she was an amazing woman. She was from a small town in West Virginia, just kind of a hillbilly, but very tough, very, very agreeable, very faith-based, just understood what it meant to be a human being. And she said, no, we're getting my son tested. And they tested me. And it turns out I was not just gifted, but highly gifted. And what many people do not understand about kids, that's as much of a struggle as being on the other side of that spectrum because you're so different. You see the world so differently. Mm-hmm. And so these kids we think are strange or weird or interesting, those are the ones, place your bet on those folks because they're the ones that, in my opinion, God has touched with something special. And that really special thing is they have discernment. They can see through the nonsense very early on. I never believed the stuff I was being taught in school. I never believed that I had to be on the same rails or the roads that everyone else was on. But honestly, Chris, it makes a tough life. Mm-hmm. But in that toughness, you develop something that other people don't have. And that's grit. You're going to get up because you're just not going to be beat by it. And that's what makes an entrepreneur. I mean, the ones that will pull something out of their head and make it real in the world, for sure.
I want to walk back to something you said about how many successful entrepreneurs, something broke inside of them.
Yeah.
And I know you've been through a lot of things, and it's in your book. But for those that don't know, take us back to the season where you experienced that first break that shaped a lot of who you are and how you operate today.
Yeah. Well, there's a number of things. First of all, coming out of that sort of childhood that I had where I was different, I always was known as the angry kid. To this day, people tell me you're kind of angry, but I don't think people understand the fire that's really just a misunderstood direction. But, I was, because of that, I became a very good football player. angry guys tend to like to hit people hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so if someone allows you to do that legally in a space, you become very good at it. And so I was kind of on my way, I was very young for being in high school, but I was kind of on my way to a college football career. And then my father died when I was 16, and everything went a different direction for me. I had a bunch of offers at D1 schools, but I couldn't do it. The whole world, just the floor came out from underneath me. And so suddenly I was in more of a survival mode, trying to deal with that whole thing. And just a total shift in life. My father died quite suddenly at the age of 48. So, it was a real gut punch. To this day, when I hear about kids who lose their parents early, I have a very sort of deep heart for those kids. So I know what they're going through. And so my whole world went off track. So I ended up having to work, trying to keep my head above water, work multiple jobs, trying to make my way through college. I went to junior college for a while. That was actually a pretty good experience. Actually, I went to Santa Monica College in Los Angeles there, and then transferred to UCLA, and ended up dropping out because I just found the whole process ridiculous. I was paying a ton of money, and professors had me buy their books, $200 for a book that we never crack open. It's supposed to be in a Western civics class, and this guy, all he can talk about is his favorite restaurants in Mexico and how to get out by bribing the federales. And I think, this is crazy. I'm just going to go make some money. This is not the world I want to exist in. Everyone here is just kind of following a set pattern. And for someone with my personality type, that's not a good thing. So actually ended up being probably one of the better decisions I made in my life, because I never learned the way it's done. I just said what makes sense. So, but made it hard. And I didn't have the connections, and, I didn't have the degree or the paperwork, which people reminded me of a lot in my life. Then life didn't get a whole lot easier. I ended up in a relationship that was really tough. I don't talk about it a lot, but I ended up in a relationship with someone who was quite mentally ill. Didn't know at the time, and that really took its toll on me, like, terribly. And in that same period of time, my mother got ill with cancer, terminal cancer, and so it just kept piling on. And I found myself read the book. I found myself at the end of all of this, when my mother was gone, who's my biggest supporter, ended up in an empty apartment with nothing. Just my whole life had come apart. And so I had to rebuild from nothing. And that is an incredibly hard place to be in your mid to late 20s. It is incredibly, strangely eye-opening, clarifying. It is a place that you never want to be in your life, but it rips away all the illusions of life. Like, you better know who you are. You better know what your faith is. You better know what you're capable of. And in the end of that, I had to dig deeper than I've ever had to dig. I was in a very dark place. You talk about, people, it's interesting. I hear people talk about how depressed they are, how upset they are, how tough life is. But until you've been in a place with no oxygen and no light like that, you don't really know darkness, but you also don't really know yourself. And when you strip away all of the nonsense, all the illusions, everything else that's out there that you believe in yourself, not the Pinterest version of yourself or the Instagram version of yourself, the real version, the one that you were born to be, things get clear, not easier, but clear. And once you realize who you are and the power that you have in you to overcome those things, and once you find some purpose in that, you can damn near do anything. But I wouldn't want to live it again. And so I sort of divide my life into before those moments and after those moments, because coming out of that moment, I met my wife, Kate, and that was life changing. And I can't tell, especially young men, enough that the woman, or even ladies, the man you choose to spend your life with will dictate 99% of who you become and what your happiness is. And so for me, that ended that whole era of my life, when I look back on it now, a lifetime later, was just God stripping away the meaninglessness, stripping away the illusion, and letting me be the person I needed to be, to become the husband I needed to be, the father I needed to be, the business leader I needed to be, to get rid of the fear. Because we all carry so much fear, but when you've lost it all, say, I survived. How much fear is there left?
Sure.
Right. So that's why I can start companies like I have. That's why I can take on entrenched companies, because they don't scare me. Very little in this world scares me. And the only thing it does is something happening to my family, So, I've had nothing before and I'm here. If I had nothing again, I'm still here. I still have my faith. I have my health. I have the things that matter. So that clarity is very important when you're building things that don't exist, right? When you're going to take that on, you better be that person. So I see it as almost a necessary gauntlet to go through to become the man you're supposed to be, to build the things you're supposed to build. Because I wouldn't have the tools and the strength that I have today if I didn't go through it.
It's fascinating because as I hear your story and I hear the things that you've been through and the fractures as you talk about in your book, it's interesting when you watch a show like My 600-Pound Life. Many of these people experienced traumatic things just like you have. They lost their parents at young ages. They experienced like all of these things where it was just like all of these tough things were just raining down on them. Yet they chose to be victims, and you chose, you've heard it before, to be a victor. So what do you attribute that to, that you were able to go from a place where you had no money, which means you have no energy, right?
Yeah.
You have nothing in your brain that gives you evidence that things are even going to move the right direction, and you lose your mom and your dad. Like, that's a lot, man.
Oh, and there's a lot more I didn't talk about on top of that, but yeah,
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah. So what I attribute it to is just pure grit. Some people just have that grit, I think some people are gifted with that. It's looked at, as you're growing up, it's looked at as a net negative, but it's not. You're the guy, no matter what, you're getting up that hill. You're the guy who's going to continue no matter how hard it gets. I think part of it is because I have a younger 3 boys, you're always fighting for the scraps, as it were.
Yeah.
But I also think that I grew up in a very tough environment. I went to, LA public schools, and those kids tend to be very tough, right? I come from a generation. I'm in my 50s. I come from a generation that's just tough. We're just a tough group of people. So I think a lot of people play victim because the world paints that narrative that you should, right? But if you're someone with my mindset of, I don't believe the systems anyway, I hate the systems, I want to rip them all apart, that just doesn't resonate or land with me, man. And the other thing is faith. There's a part in the book I talk about, I don't want to give too much away if people want to read it, but I'm a person, I said, of deep faith. And there's a part, and I don't know if you've finished it yet, but there's a part at the end where God actually spoke to me one time audibly in my darkest moment, literally said something to me. And I still get emotional thinking about it, but I was literally, people talk about rock bottom. I've known some people, and I have a thing, Chris, for people who have recovered. If people have been alcoholics or drug users or survived massive abuse, massive betrayal, whatever it is, and they've come out. I love redeemed people, man. They just know something that other people don't. It's like a pendulum. I've always believed that you can be as good as you can be bad. So know that as dark as it can get, you have that amount of stored energy to make it that light. So the reason other people gain 600 pounds or fall apart and just is because they just don't use the stored energy, man. They don't go into those reserves and say, wait a second, I got something more. I got faith. And if you got faith, man, you got everything. I think about, if you look at this biblically, man, I look at it and say, look at what Moses went through, right? Talk about a test of faith. Look at Aaron, look at Job, look at Jesus, and your life's never going to be worse than Jesus taking on the sin of the world on the cross, right? So sometimes we all have our crosses to bear. So if the ones watching over us have been through so much worse, then we can do it, right? I'm not Job. My life was hard, but I didn't lose my entire family. I didn't, I lost for a season, for a time. But if I look at my life now versus what it was then, it made me into the man that I am. So God will put those who have the strength through the gauntlet, right? Because you're one of his chosen warriors. So go through the gauntlet. Know that sometimes you're just going to have to grow in the pit. And sometimes, horrible as it is, the people you trusted pushed you into that pit. But that's okay, because that's not where your trust belongs anyway. So, you know, it really is just a decision. It's a simple crossroads. You know, you talk like, it's funny. I was watching about these blues singers, and they talk about the crossroads where they meet the devil at the crossroads. You got to make a choice. And all of us at some point are going to meet the devil at the crossroads, but there's only two ways to go. It's darkness or light, man. So darkness looks good for a while because it's easy. The light's tough, man. It's scary. You can see this craggy, horrible, you know, road ahead of you sometimes, but it's at the end of the day, man, it's choose one. That's it.
Yeah.
You know? And you be blessed that you've been given that choice. So that's
grit's a really difficult thing to hear from people who have been through things, because at the end of the day, you know, you'll see guys like David Goggins be like, what motivated you? He's like, just do it, man. You know, at the end of the
friend who knows David quite well.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. So just get off your butt and do it, you know? And I think that one of the biggest enemies of growth is comfort, as we know. And so for someone like you who's been through these very difficult things, and you say, have grit and just do it, I almost want to frame it this way. I showed my kids all the Rocky series this past week, and it was so fun. And man, it's just amazing to see the arc of the story and all the things he goes through. But at the end of the movie, it's 2 hours of that movie, and it's like, wow, you saw him go from here to here.
Yeah.
But you're explaining a situation where you were at the depths of low. And so I'd love to dive into just the timeline and the doubt and the head trash as you worked through coming up from the bottom.
I mean, it was a good chunk of the first half of my life, actually. It's fighting through all that stuff and making myself believe enough that I could do things. So, but I want to say something about that. We always fight doubt. We always fight things in our lives, no matter how put together our lives are. So it's not so much a timeline. I mean, there's dips and there's peaks and there's valleys, right? But for me, the timeline was, you know, until I was about 27, 28 years old, I was just scrapping and fighting. And then, like I said, end up in a situation with someone who that condition had a condition that just ripped my life to pieces and just betrayed me at a time that I needed someone desperately. So, you know, that kind of thing, it still happens. You know, it's not so much that it doesn't still happen, that I'm not still fighting things. Those demons are always after you, especially if you're a person of the light. Sure. Right. But, yeah, that time was kind of the first half of my life. I was out of place, man. I was misplaced. I wasn't where I was supposed to be. And that I think is where, if you don't recognize that, I think that's kind of the key. Because if you don't recognize you're misplaced, if you don't recognize that you've been getting a message to do something different and you haven't had the courage or the fortitude to do that, you're going to keep getting kicked in the head until you do. You know, God is subtle in messages until he's not. Right. Sometimes things have to get bad enough for you to recognize your false self. So in terms of timeline, I mean, I guess my childhood was rough because I was misplaced in an area that I didn't belong. I was not a Southern California kid. I was a Southern kid who still says the word pecan instead of pecan, right?
Oh, the distinction.
That's the right way to, hey, by the way, that is the right way to say it. So I'll say it anyway.
Okay.
But, and you know, I tell this great story. When I first moved to California, I had a friend come over to my house, and he actually called my mother by her first name. And I thought the floor was going to fall out underneath us. You don't call a Southern woman by her first name. No way that, right? As a 10-year-old or kid or whatever. So, and I think that was tough, just kind of fighting through that and trying to learn there was no real justice in the world. And then going sort of through a tough high school situation, losing stuff, you know, with my father, just trying to deal with that. So there's a lot of these different things, but you have that choice still, you know, am I going to choose darkness or am I going to choose light? So from a timeline, I kind of went through this thing till about I was at 27. And I told you that moment where I absolutely was just crushed bottom. That's when God spoke to me audibly And the greatest thing about that, and this story is in my book, is a week later, I met my wife. And I'm not going to tell anyone what he said to me if you wanted to go read the book. But
Yeah,
it's
worth reading.
it's important that the message, because what it made me realize was that you're taken a certain place for a reason, and that matters. And it doesn't mean that I was healed at all. I mean, not even a little bit. I had years and years of healing to do. But just what I would say to anybody struggling at that level, and people struggle more mightily than I have. I mean, there's a lot of people there without homes. I live in a beautiful home. I have a beautiful wife, beautiful family. I run an amazing company. But what I would say to anybody struggling out there with this stuff, not just you want to start something to be some, just take the first step. You talk about David Goggins, he says, just do it. He's right. Because what is your choice? You can sit there and stew in your nonsense. You can sit there and stew in your pain, or you can get up and take that first step, and then that second step, and then that third step. And then eventually you've gone a mile, right? Yeah. And every step you grow in your strength, every step you grow in your faith, every step you grow in your purpose. And once you find any kind of purpose, it's jet fuel, man. Like you're going to the races at that point.
So good.
And the easiest way to find purpose is if you get knocked down on your knees, my advice is have a conversation when you're down there, because you're down on your knees for a reason. So have a conversation with something bigger than yourself.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. And I actually want to take this the direction of how you raise your boys, because here's what I know to be true. Successful people that have a lot of discomfort that they work through and then create a comfortable life by default, have a really difficult time motivating their kids and all the things, right? But I wonder, how do you operate in terms of being a father where boys live in a beautiful house and dad does have a great company and still keep them hungry?
Boy and a girl. My son's in college. My daughter's just upperclassman in high school right now.
Yeah.
So that's hard. My kids have gone to private school most of their entire lives. I just telling somebody the other day, you go to the parking lot at my daughter's school, it looks like, Beverly Hills, right? They drive nicer cars than I do. So part of it is you have to instill in them that suffering is okay. You have to initiate a little bit of suffering for them. Like, come run with me, come work out with me. It's a fine line. It's hard because I don't want them to live the life I had, but I also don't want them thinking that life it's a cakewalk. Sure. Faith again plays a massive part in that. And going through, like my daughter's fantastic. She reads her Bible every day. Right. And so there's questions about that. My son too. And I think, that's really important to say, look at what came before you. I try and really instill in my kids and my family in general, this is where we come from. Like, this is our history. Your grandmother was from a small West Virginia town. Your grandfather was a Vietnam vet that had a Purple Heart, right? Combat wounded and dealt with his own demons. His father died when he was 11. But you come from this amazing family, come from these kings of Europe. So this is who you are. So it means you have a responsibility to be a better person, right? But I think in today's world, faith is probably the key. Keep faith a very important part of your family. Have conversations about it. Let questions come up and answer those tough questions. But then also, like, you mentioned David Goggins. He's great because, create suffering in your own life. Move away from comfort, right? Go do the things that are hard, the things that you can't. Starting my company, it's hard. I'm doing something hard. It requires a lot of faith, a lot of sleepless nights. It's hard. You've got to do the hard things. And stop thinking life is easy, because at the end of the day, if you continue to think life easy, it's going to get hard. And I think a lot of these younger generations finding out, I can't find a job. Well, what skills do you have? Well, I've got a degree in philosophy. Okay. What else? What else have you done? What have you done? I like to tell people that, stop giving your kids so much value. They don't have any value yet. They've brought no value to society. They're more of a liability. And I think that's important to know. So I'm not going to go and say to my kids, hey, you're a liability. but I am going to say, hey, prove yourself, right? Like my son used to play lacrosse, and I'd say, he said, Dad, that kid's so big. I said, I don't care. Go knock him on his butt. Give it everything you got. Go out there and leave it all on the field, man, because that's life. That's how you succeed.
Yes.
I think we live in a world right now, Chris, where people, especially young people, when you ask them, I saw a survey that said, what do you want to do? And like the majority of kids, I want to be an influencer.
Yeah. Dude.
What have you done? Like, why would anyone listen to you? Right? That's silly. It's silly. So no one's saying I want to build, the next great widget. No one says I want to build the next great system. We've got to get back to that. So for me, like with my son, for example, I say, hey, come build this thing with me. Come solve this problem with me. Come create a product. That's what he wants to do. So make things hard. And I don't make it easy. I say, no, you solve that problem. I'm not here to solve it. I'm paying you to solve it. Figure it out. Right. And leave him on his own. Let them struggle. So we need more struggle. And so I try to walk a line between giving my kids too much. Like I assure you, their cars are nicer than the car I drove at their age. But at the same time, I say, well, hey, go pick the weeds in the yard, right? Like stuff still got to get done. So it's tough because you don't want their kids and their kids and their kids, be generationally wealthy, right? Say, I don't have to work. That's never going to happen in my family. So I think you just got to edge yourself. You got to be an example. You got to let them see you do hard things. Let them see you go to the gym and do things you shouldn't be able to do at your age. Let them see you push harder. Let them see, for me, let them see how I love their mother, and build that relationship. And those things will settle out. But baseline to all of it is push the faith, man. Like make sure they believe in something greater in themselves so they don't become their own gods. I think that's really important.
That's really good. Okay. The luxury I have of having you on my podcast and reading your book is I get to ask you a selfish question as a reader. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we are aligned with faith, here is something that I just can't get a clear answer from on anybody. Because in chapter 2, you talk about the fuel no one talks about, which is obsessiveness. Okay.
Yes.
However, what I've experienced is internally, I'm always thinking of work. I always have this obsessiveness of like, I need to get this thing done and I need to go check this thing for this client and just deliver. However, it also pulls from my kids. And that's really, really, really tough. And it was interesting. I was on a podcast recently and this guy asked me, he said, as an entrepreneur with 6 kids, he said, how many hours is too many for a Christian entrepreneur? And I said, it's not about the hours. It's literally, for me, anything that pulls me away from making sure I have time for discipleship and like really, truly investing in my kids, even though I feel so anxious, like I need to get to work. But I'm a young entrepreneur who's trying to grow something, and obsessiveness is almost like at odds with Christianity as an entrepreneur, it feels like, but if you see it any differently, please.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you why you think you're taking from your kids when they're watching you as an example of how you get things done.
Yeah.
Is that not a good Christian example to say,
Sure.
we've got to build the walls sometimes, right? Fathers, your role as a father for me is not to be there for them 100% of the time and nurture them. Your role is to show them what it takes to support a family. We'll show them what hard work takes. You don't just live by faith, you live by works. So your wife's job, in my mind, would probably be to bolster the faith. Your job is to show them the works, right? So my kids see me working hard, and my kids now work hard as a result of that, right? As far as obsessiveness goes, like this is the tough answer nobody wants. But when you're an entrepreneur, to build something that doesn't exist, you're not going to make it unless you're obsessed with that idea. But understand that what you're building is something generational. What your kids are seeing is not, dad's not always there. What they're seeing is, oh, dad's out there supporting us. And they might not totally understand it now when they're young, but they're going to understand it later. It doesn't mean you take all your time like a lunatic and just don't spend time with them. But if you have sons or your daughter, you bring them along, say, come help me with this. Like I just sat with my son for 2 hours working on something, right? And now we're working together towards a goal. There's so much there. So I think part of that is just reinterpreting what you're doing. Right? You're showing them what a good man does. You're the guy that would step in front of a bullet for any one of them right now. That's what a good man does. right? You're the guy that if someone told you, look, you need to work a 1 week straight with no sleep because your family's depending on it, you would work 1 week straight with no sleep because your family's depending on it.
Mhm.
So men are. I think we need to not redefine. I think we need to recapture what men are in this world. Men are not. They are not here to be, these sort of tender, loving. We are to a certain extent, but as I said on another recent podcast, you have to be a tender lion, right? You have to be the guy who's willing to go out there and grind it out, because otherwise we've become, I hate to say it, it's almost feminized in some way,
Oh,
right?
yes.
We're not there to, we're, listen, when I got in trouble as a kid, all my mom had to say is wait till your father gets home. And I was like, oh dear Lord. Right. Because my father was the disciplinarian. He was the guy coming home from work. We have to get back to those sort of structures where, and stop judging ourselves as men on a different set of values that we somehow developed in the last generation, right? Oh, you need to be the one to nurture your kids. You're not. You're the one to discipline your kids. You're the one to show them what hard work is, and stop feeling guilty about that. I'm sorry, I have to take a little bit of time away from the family because you've got 6 kids. You got to feed them. You got to
Oh, yeah.
for them, right? You've got to put clothes and shoes on their feet, right? You've got a lot of things to do, and somehow we've flipped that on its head. Oh, dad wasn't here 5 days this week to read me bedtime stories.
Mhm.
Well, you might have been there 2 days a week, but duty calls, right? If there's a war right now, you and I get pulled into it. That's how it's going to be, right?
Yeah.
When when again, biblically, if you look at especially the Old Testament, when wars were fought, men left their families, walked around the walls of Jericho, right? I mean, these are the things that we have to get back to. So if there's a level of guilt or how do I balance this as a Christian, we have to rethink that, Chris. We have to rethink sort of our role, right? In a more traditional sense. I think you're looking at your role there as in a modern 2026 sense. I don't think you're looking at it in 1000 BC sense, and all the generations that came before us and how they looked at it. Certainly my father was not that guy. Were we exceptionally close emotionally? Probably not. But did I learn a lot from him on what hard work was? Did I learn what a man's role was in his family? I sure did. And, I don't really pull any punches about that. It's tough. Now, having said that, I spend a lot of time with my kids as much as I can. Every moment I can, I do. But there are times like I have to go to Europe, or I have to go to Asia. It is what it is. So, but they see you, and I trust me. I'm sure my kids are a lot older than yours. At some point, they will come back to you and say, you know what? I get it. You were right. Especially your boys. They'll come back and say, you were right.
Yeah.
You were right.
Yeah.
So, I think it's more of a, just a cultural guilt trip at some level. So kind of might on it, but again, I'm a lot older than you. So
I certainly appreciate that take. Just a little bit of context is, I used to own a gym, and I'd wake up at 3:45 a.m. and I wouldn't get home till 8 p.m. My wife had 3 under 3, and it was just a grind, man. For 2.5 straight years, I was doing that, and I just felt like I was destroying my family with that type of obsession towards what I was doing and imbalance. Now, it was my job to fix that and create more margin by bringing on other trainers and growing the business enough, et cetera. And so I still look at that as a responsibility of myself, but I think there is a trigger for me whenever I see like be obsessive, because I know that's what it takes. But at the same time, I'm like, oh man, Lord, are you calling me to be radically obsessive over this thing? And is that biblical, or am I selfishly creating some form of escapism in my obsession?
Are you radically obsessive in your faith? Are you radically obsessive in your faith?
Am I radically obsessive in my faith? Well, where's the bar?
Just simple question, right? And then it's a yes or no question, right? Are you radically obsessive?
Well, very, very disciplined in getting in the Word and making sure I understand the spiritual temperature of my household.
If you couldn't do those things, you would make time to do those things, right?
Well, that's the struggle right now. So it's like,
Yeah. But what I'm saying, Chris, is sometimes you just got to figure it out, right? Like maybe when you're working for him, you say, "Hey guys, I'm going to leave for 2 hours to go pick up my kids and take them to lunch. I'm going to do that." I mean, you make time for it. If you truly want something, nothing will stop you from doing it. If you don't truly want something, anything will stop you from doing it.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's just, you got to go to a different level, man. Like what I would do is go pick up my kids at school and then take them to go get a smoothie, and we'd sit and talk. Or I'd say, "Hey, this weekend we're going to dinner," and I'd do that with them. I also chose a job where I try to work. I work from home for years, right?
Yes.
So I'm there, so they get a lot more time than you think. And by the way, you said I was destroying my family. Did you destroy them? Are they gone? Did you wipe them out?
No. I ended up having to shut the gym down because I felt like it was just incredible imbalance.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, you made a choice, right? So, and that's fine. What I'm saying in my book there is to hold the things that do not exist. It's not a part-time gig, man. It is not.
No, it's not.
It's not something you're not going to be up at midnight, talking to someone in Taiwan about, right? It's not something you're not going to have to pack your bags, say, "Oh, hey, honey, I got to go to London tomorrow." Right? It's just, when you sign up for this, you're signing your family up for it. But understand, you're also building something that's a legacy that most people never do. And if you do it in faith, and if you do it with purpose, then you're going to get to a situation where it all makes sense in the end, and your kids are going to grow from it, not be hurt.
Yeah. No, that's a good take, man. That is really good. And yeah, I appreciate you being open to my pushback on that chapter, because you're right. I mean, obviously you're right. When it comes to that's what's necessary. Let's move on to chapter 3. The first page of chapter 3, the quiet violence of doubt. I literally took a picture of it and I sent it to like 10 entrepreneurs.
How funny.
I did, man. I didn't have to underline anything because the whole page was valuable. Because this book, man, enters the conversation in an entrepreneur's head, literally the trash between the left and the right ear.
Oh yeah.
Like one I've not read, seriously. And and what's so real about the quiet violence of doubt that you said was you said it resurfaces the imagery of old wounds not as memories but as predictions for the future. Ooh, unpack that a little bit more than just that sentence.
Yeah, we're creatures of habit, and we tend to believe what came before is what will come later. We don't tend to see our own growth, right? So the specters and the phantoms and the demons from the past love to resurface. I happen to believe a lot of those things are very real. So, they tend to tell you the story of, well, remember that time you failed? Or remember that time that girl didn't want to hang out with you? Or remember that time that those people called you stupid? Or you had that stuttering problem, or people told you looked funny, or you didn't have what it took, right? And those voices stay there until you kill them. You have to kill those voices. And so what a lot of times happens to people is they have created this narrative from those voices. It says, this is who you are. You have to remember who you are. But it doesn't take into account growth. It doesn't take into account your own personal evolution, your own growth in faith. But it doesn't mean those voices aren't there, man. It doesn't mean that they're not constantly haunting you, and that the demons aren't laughing at you all the time saying, "I got you this time," right? You fall back in old habits, you get lazy, whatever it is. So people tend to think the past is the future. And so to build what doesn't exist, to build anything meaningful, and again, not just a business, but a life, you gotta shut those voices up. You gotta tell them just to shut up. I don't care what you have to say, because your past is not your prediction. It's not your future if you choose for it not to be. It is a learning experience. It's a foundation. It's where I learn, man, I'm not going to do that. I touched the stove. I'm not going to do that again. Right. Sure. But the weird thing is most people go, out, right? They'll keep touching the stove because that's what I do. I'm stupid and I touch the stove. Right.
Yeah.
So the point is that even as an entrepreneur, an experienced entrepreneur, you still have these voices of doubt, and people will doubt you until you succeed. And then they will all tell you, oh, I knew you were going to do it. Right. And so you got to just put all that to rest. I go to the gym every day. And there's days I go, man, I'm just tired. And then, immediately, I say, I just shut up, go. I don't care, and when I do that, I actually kind of punish myself. I go, fine, you're going to go harder today because you thought that about yourself. Right. I mean, you're a gym owner, right? Fitness guy.
Yeah.
So, like those voices will say, yeah, I can just take today off. No, you can't. You can't just take today off because then you've lied to yourself. So that's the way you get around that stuff is you make a promise to yourself, make a promise to your family, to your wife, you make a promise to God and you say, I'm going to do this no matter what, no matter how hard it is, I'm going to get up and do it. And I'm not going to believe I'm the person those people told me you're weak, you're not good enough, you're not fast enough. When I started in high school in football, I was very young. I graduated high school when I was 17, started college at 17. So I was very undersized time when I started in football and was on the B team when I was in 10th grade. The B, not even the JV team, the B team.
Okay. There's the B team's under the JV team.
JV team. It was for the guys under like 160 pounds or something.
Okay.
By the time I graduated high school, I was 240 pounds. I was a top 50 player in the state of California, and I was recruited by 4 Division I schools because I decided that voice that was telling me I wasn't good enough, I wasn't big enough, I wasn't strong enough. And I never was, by the way. I was never big enough, good enough, or strong enough, but I believed. I said, I'm better than these guys. I'm better than this. I'm better than my own doubts. And that's what you have to do. We are by far our own worst enemy, by far our own worst enemy. We let those voices rule us. We let our head instead of our heart rule us. Like when you're in the gym and you got that one last rep, man, you got nothing left, but there's something in you. You don't have the strength left in your body, but yet you get it. Like there is no way the physics of this works except the faith of it works. Right. And so you have to let those voices go. You have to let your past self go. Your past self, every day, you're graced for the new day. The sun rises. You have breath in your lungs. You're graced for the new opportunity. And that person of yesterday is gone. That failure of yesterday is gone. And that failure is not even a failure. It's a learning experience. Right. And so everything I went through, as hard as it was, I look at it now and I think, I see it. I get it. I understand why I went through it. But those voices say, yeah, but remember when you were this kind of fat, goofy looking kid and none of the girls want to hang out with you and the guys thought you were stupid and the teacher thought you were remedial and all this other stuff. I heard a story there. I love this story. There was a guy, I think it's a true story, everyone told him he was stupid and he'd never succeed. And then he took his SAT and he got like a 1480 on it. Sonny was like, wow, maybe I'm not stupid, right? And he suddenly started applying himself and just became really successful. A teacher started to love him. He ended up going like a Ivy League school and just very successful guy in his life. Like 10 years later, he gets a letter from the college board saying, I hate to inform you, but we made a mistake. We mixed up. You actually had a 740 on the SAT. And yet the guy was a multimillionaire, successful, because at some point he believed it. Yeah. So the narrative in your head, and going back to faith, the narrative in your head is really important, but people don't think they have value if they're not getting likes or they're not, getting followers or whatever you don't even know those people. Right.
Right.
But if you can find your value in the Lord, if you can find your value in your family, if you can find value in yourself, those narratives die, and they die a very quick and tragic death. But you move on to the new you. You move on to a reborn you, and that every day you have that opportunity, every single day. So, those things is the point of that whole chapter is don't make those voices your predictor. Make them I knew them then. I knew them when. Who cares? But that's not who I am today. Yes. Not even a little bit.
Yeah. Well, from the first page to the end of the chapter, I was hooked. I was just like, wow, this is exactly what I need to hear. And like I mentioned, just such a strong understanding of what's going through an entrepreneur's head. Like, obviously this guy is who he says he is. Um, on doubt, Sam.
Yeah.
Let's talk about LARC. Okay. You built this company. You have a napkin behind you. I'd love for you to share just a little bit of what that napkin behind you over your right shoulder means to you and why.
Yeah. So it's framed behind me. That's the birth certificate of LARC. So I was at a lunch with a gentleman who owns a very large wood crating company, and he took a phone call and said, we've got these server racks coming in next, 8 weeks and cost, this much and this much work. And I said, hey, how much does this crate cost? And he said, they're about $1,400 each. I said, that is crazy, man. Just put a toilet paper tube over those things. Shit, what are you doing? Right? There's a better way to do this. And so he went to the restroom. I grabbed a pen and that napkin and drew a quick sketch of an idea I had for making a reusable modular container for moving these things. I actually asked that guy, hey, you want to go into business with me? I think I have an idea here. And he ultimately declined. So I did some research and said, wow, this is it's a massive opportunity. And now, even like 10, 11 years later, the data centers, the AI world, all these racks moving and robots and all the stuff that we move. It's just, I said, I'm doing this. I mean, we're crazy not to. We're not going to cut down trees and grind them up and use all kinds of chemicals and water and electricity and then use them one time and throw them out. That's a terrible solution, right? And this has been, I always tell people, we found crates in Egyptian tombs, right? Like that's how long, 4,000 years, 5,000 years we've been using wood. And yet we're moving the most advanced products in the world in that system. That makes no sense, right? Everything is advancing except the box. That's stupid. Right. So, at LARC, it stands for Logistics Advanced Research Center. My background's deep in logistics. And I know people don't think this is the sexiest thing in the world. Oh, this guy makes boxes. I make boxes for the most important products on earth. I make boxes that ship the things that allow this podcast to happen, and so sometimes you find the things that aren't so sexy, and make that and undergird a system. And that's a really good place to be as an entrepreneur. Don't be the guy who has to be the influencer. Don't be the guy who has to sit out front all the time. Be the guy who makes something that the world actually needs.
Yes.
And then you become very successful. So many people want to be glamorous and, I've invented the next great widget that everyone is using. And that's not always where the money's at. That's not where the solutions are at. So we have grown, dramatically in those years, survived the COVID insanity, and continue to grow. And we ship things now for the large companies in the world. I mean, the largest companies in the world call us to solution things for them. And so we're still growing. We're still scraping up the hill because that's what it takes. Sometimes it takes a decade, sometimes more. But it is pretty cool to go from a napkin sketch to talking to CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world, some of the biggest tech companies in the world, some of the biggest military companies in the world, aviation companies, robotics companies, and knowing that you play, though what seems a minor part, you're playing a part in building this whole future. So yeah.
That's so cool, man. And we were just talking about doubt, and I got to ask you, your company services some of the largest companies in the world. Mm-hmm. How did doubt play into actually getting these contracts? Like, what did you have to fight between your left and your right ear in order to feel like you earned a spot at a table with some of these large companies?
For me personally, there wasn't any doubt that I earned it. I had a career in Silicon Valley, so I'd been around these guys, but it was more than that. It was my past, informs my current day. Right. And these people don't intimidate me. They're not different than me. And so I just emailed them, called them, went and met them, talked to people I knew who could give me connections and said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. My very first meeting was actually with Google. I called them and said, hey, if I built this thing, would you use it? And they said, well, come in and talk to us. So I met with like 12 people in a room, showed them my idea. And they said, if you could build it, we'll buy it.
Pre-revenue?
Oh, before I even had a product.
So now really to bring this whole thing full circle, you are you go from being a young man who loses dad at 16, loses mom at 25, is at the bottom, at the bottom, rock bottom of life.
Yeah.
And then you make your way to Silicon Valley.
I was in Valley at the time all that happened, actually. Yeah.
Oh, oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you go from a kid who didn't like school, didn't like the system, to working your way into Silicon Valley?
I went to work. I was working in Los Angeles in marketing, and I gained an incredible skill set and things like printing and distribution. And so, without a college degree, I went, and guy I knew was working at a company at the time and said, "Hey, we need someone to handle this stuff. You know about this, and this?" And I said, "Yeah, I know all that stuff." He said, "Well, you come work for us." And I just started working my way up. So, ended up at that company as a senior director. A few years later, I mean, 3 years after that collapse happened in my life, I had a company going that was making millions in revenue just because I decided I was going to do it. It's really just a decision. It's funny. People tend to think that these things are really big, drawn out ideas that take years to figure out. If you love something, if you want to do something, decide to do it. Well, I don't have any experience in that. Yeah, we live in 2026, so get on the internet. If AI systems that can teach you more in a day than you can learn in a college degree. I mean, seriously, we have the tools now I didn't have back then, but it's really just a decision. There is doubt in it, but you have doubt in anything. You have doubt that you picked the right thing for dinner. So what? Just go ahead and eat, right? You have doubt that, you're a good father sometimes. So what? You're doing the best you can, right? You just keep grinding. You have doubt about everything in your life, every decision you make. The woman you married, you go, yeah, it is the right person. So get moving. You have doubts about everything in life, but that's just those demons whispering in your ear. So just ignore them, right? You're going to have those doubts. And I use the term quiet violence of doubt because it is violent. It's literally violent to your psyche. It's violent to your soul, right? I mean, you want to talk about faith. How many times does it say fear not in the Bible? You know the answer to that? You do, right? It's 365 times. Why? Once for every day. So fear not. What do you have to fear? There's what are you going to lose, right? Go get it. Go after it. Stop doubting yourself. Stop doubting it because it is violent. It's violent to your family to doubt. It's violent to yourself. It's violent to your future. It's violent to everything that you should be believing in. If you claim to be a person of faith, then dang it, have faith and go and do it. Right? If you fail, well, failure is just learning how something doesn't work. We fail all the time at LARC, but fail fast. That's my advice. Fail fast and go get it. I wrote a chapter about doubt because I want people to know it's there. It's always going to be there. Always. So what? So what? You could sit there stagnant on it. But it's like I tell my kids, they can empty the dishwasher and they bitch and moan about it for 15 minutes. They go, you could have done it in 2. Right? So you're going to do that to yourself. So every time that you think, hey, I got to get this work done. I really don't want to do it. So you're just that 16-year-old kid bitching and moaning about it, or you're just going to get to work, right? You're going to be an adult and get to work. Are you going to talk about, I don't have this, or I don't have that. I don't have this skill. I don't drive this car. I don't know anyone in this industry. Write an email, find their email address, send them an email, send 100. If you got to send 100, send 1,000. I mean, it's just hard work. That's all. So the whole point at the end of that chapter, you probably say is like, the doubt's going to be there. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things are going to be there. The sky is blue. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes it's hot. Sometimes it's cold. Sometimes you're sick. Sometimes you're rich. Sometimes you're poor. But sometimes, tomorrow is not a day on the calendar. Get after it. Right.
Yeah. For a guy that has experienced all the things you've experienced and is accomplishing what you're accomplishing now with LARC and successful children and an amazing marriage, what is success moving forward?
Man, I think you just named part of it. It's if your family is intact, if you're happy, because I'll tell you what I tell everybody when I get asked that question sometimes. I'll tell you, when you're standing over a grave site, 16 years old, throwing dirt onto your father's coffin, 8 years later, your mother's, you get real clear on what happiness is. You'd give a lot for another hour with them just to say what you need to say. You would give pretty much your fortune to have those moments. And so happiness is knowing that your family is happy and healthy. That's important. That you have something of value and purpose in your life, that you're moving things forward. Is it having a lot of money? I mean, that's always a good thing. I'm not going to say that's not a good thing, but that's not what it's about. Because here's what I also think. If your house was on fire, what would you grab? Whatever you grab, that's your happiness, man, right there.
Yeah.
Simple. I'd grab my wife, my kids, my dogs, and I'm out the door. If the cars burn up, if the house burns down, whatever, okay, we'll rebuild. But that's not, it's a real simple test. If your house is on fire, what would you grab? Are you going to grab your laptop? You're going to grab your social media? You're going to grab your clothes? What are you grabbing? That's how you define happiness. Real simple.
And what has been the price of success for you, Sam?
The hardest or the steepest price I have paid is having to face my own demons from the past, having to relive those things that hurt me, but from a different perspective. I've had some things come, from my past recently come up, like in the last couple of years, that have just came back to haunt me. Things I never processed at the time. It was so hard at the time that my mind couldn't process all of it. And so now I had a situation where I was doing some work, and a lot of those memories came flooding back. And I said, okay. And it was almost contemporaneous, like I was still living them, because I went through so much, like when my mother passed away, I couldn't mourn her loss properly. And so I had to revisit that. And so that was hard. And a lot of that came through because I was working so much on this and trying to be the best husband and father, and like the stuff you talked about. And a lot of that stuff just came flooding back. So having to face myself, having to face my own history, that's really hard, but it was necessary process. That's how you become the person you need to be. And we all carry some level of trauma, some level of pain, some level of fracture. But the Sufi poet Rumi said the fracture is where the light exists. And that's true. That's where the light enters you, right? But you have to face those things. And the more you run from those things, the more they're going to run you down. And so I think that price is something you have to pay, and you have to be willing to face your fears, and your inadequacies, or the things that you question about yourself. That is the price of admission, really. The other stuff is just technical. Well, how do you build a company? There's 10 million books about that. That's, the bankers and the lawyers and, the raising of funds. And that's just all technical. I mean, people can do that. That's a process. But the payment is you. The payment is, who am I going to be? What level can I get to in my life that allows me to support a structure like this? Because I will tell you, there is a direct line between me and my view of myself, my strength, and how good LARC is doing, how we're growing. And I think entrepreneurs who are building really big ideas will find that to be the case. That when you're down, when you're letting those voices win that day, you're losing because of it. When you let those doubts in, you lose. So the price is strength to face yourself, strength to run down those voices, strength to run down those demons. And, the only way through is through, man. I tell my kids all the time, you want a great thing to tell your kids? Something Winston Churchill said during the Blitz. He said, if we're going to go through hell, keep going, because your option is to stand there. The only way through is through. There's only one way out, man. It's a one-way road. So if you're going through hell, keep going. Otherwise, just stand there in hell. And I don't intend to do that ever.
What's your North Star right now? I mean, you've amounted the success that you have amounted, and people would argue that you've done it. Well done. So
I would argue that's not totally true yet. You always want to, keep going and getting higher and higher up the mountain. So yeah, people that they could make that argument, but pure entrepreneurs will never agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what's continually motivating you?
My family. And probably that old, that thing that I still carry, that all people with my personality type still carry, is I'm going to prove them all wrong. And I have proven them wrong in the past, but I'm going to prove, this is weird. This is a weird one given everything we've talked about, but I think there's this thing that real entrepreneurs carry, is all those voices are still there. You're not good enough. You're not strong enough. And even though you've beaten them back, at some point you think about those people who let you down, the people who told you weren't enough. And it sounds petty, but those voices come up, and those voices drive me sometimes. I say, you want to bet? You want to see? And so all those voices, it's funny. When I look back on the people I knew who told me that, I am far more successful than they are, like in every way, not just in a business. I have a better family. I have, a better life. I have better health. I'm fitter than most people, and I'm not saying that to say I'm anything special. I'm saying that because that voice drove those voices, that guy who told you weren't enough, that teacher who said you'd never be anything. Even just the voice of the struggle, right? So we're going to keep you down. I'm going to knock you down. The people who have betrayed you in your life, who've let you down, if you read the dedication, actually, you have the book in front of you right now. If you read the dedication, what it says, my exact wording on it is, it says, and to all who believed, and especially to those who didn't. That's important. That's important because you allowed those people to dictate your self-worth at one point. Never again. And those people look at me now and they say, what happened to that guy? You happened to that guy, right? Faith happened to that guy. Strength where there was none happened to that guy. Light in the darkness happened to that guy. And so companies aren't, I don't build this to become filthy rich. And I mean, a lot of people are driven by that. I build it because I'm supposed to. It's oxygen to me to know that I wasn't the kid that they thought I was, that I do have value. In the movie Creed, the one that followed Rocky, which you're going to have to watch those now with your kids.
Yes.
There's a scene in there where he's getting beaten up in the ring and Rocky's going to throw in the towel. And he says, no, I gotta prove it. And he says, prove what? He says that I matter, that I'm not a mistake. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs at the level that we operate, that's at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to prove. That you matter, that you're not a mistake. And I think that that's a fuel that drives that obsession. It's a fuel that can do things that should be impossible. I said on a recent podcast, I think you saw it, where the odds of LARC, I actually calculated one time using an AI system, being that all the stuff I had gone through, not having a college degree. I told my co-founder, Chris Taylor, one day, I said, man, we've had a great week, but it's been rough. So I went and sat and I calculated this. And I put all the factors in, and the AI system came back and said, your chances of doing this are less than 0.1%. And then the system said, did you actually do this? And I said, yeah, we actually did it. My team actually did it. My team's amazing people. And it said, you are in rarefied air. You and your team are extraordinary. But we're not. We're just extraordinarily driven to do it. And I think that that's really important. I think, I talk about this grandiose sort of faith and strength and drive and grit. But then there is this other side of entrepreneurs that one might think is petty, which is, I'm going to kick you guys all out of here. I'm going to kick your voices out. I'm going to kick you out of my life. I'm going to prove you all wrong. And it's funny, the people who I know still some of these people who have said these kind of things to me, and I've surpassed them in pretty much every way. And I still have that drive. It's weird. It's a weird thing because you have to prove you matter. You have to prove you're not a mistake, that you were bigger than those people said. So it's again, everything about it's a dichotomy. You got to be arrogant and humble. You got to have faith and grit. And then you got to have this more petty drive to you. That's a little more, I'd say it's immature maybe, but boy, I'll tell you, there's times when I don't want to do this. And I think of something someone said to me, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it anyway. Wow. So it's a funny dichotomy, but maybe the pain at the end of the day is a huge gift, you know?
Maybe the pain is a huge gift. Wow. This is really good, Sam. I can't recommend your book enough. The Militant Mind, Psychology of Building What Doesn't Exist. And the lessons you've shared with us all today has been extremely helpful, super thought-provoking, and cannot thank you enough for joining the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Chris. I appreciate it. That's why I wrote it, is to share that story. And here's something, if I could just end with something.
Yes.
If there's one thing I can offer to the world with this book, someone asked me if you had to boil all down to that's it. You're enough. Go do it. Don't let the past beat you. Don't let those voices beat you. You can build great things that have not existed before. So go and do it.
No better way to end it, man.
Appreciate it.